All right, so get this. We're diving deep today into this pretty wild legal case. We've got all the juicy stuff, court documents, patent applications, the whole 9 yards.
Mhm.
This U.S. company, Navya Network Inc., they tried to patent something called a treatment-related quantitative decision engine over in India, and, well, let's just say things didn't exactly go according to plan.
Yeah, what's really interesting about this whole thing? It just shows how tricky it can be to patent software, especially when you're dealing with something like medicine, right? There's already so much out there. It's a really established field. You've got this company trying to do something new, trying to help patients make better decisions about their health care, and they basically hit a wall with the whole Indian patent system.
So, okay, back up a sec. For those of us who, like, don't spend all day coding, what exactly is this decision engine thingamajig?
So, think of it like this. It's basically a really fancy computer program, but instead of like cat videos or whatever, it's designed to help patients, make informed choices about their medical treatment. Like, it takes all this data from scientific studies, from what experts are saying, even from what the patient themselves prefers, and it uses that to come up with these scores, these quantitative scores for different treatment options.
Huh. That's interesting. So why did it get turned down for the patent then? What happened?
Well, their whole saga began back in 2013. That's when they first filed the patent application. And right off the bat, it got rejected by the Controller of Patents and Designs in India. So, naturally, Navya Network Inc., they're not giving up that easily. They decided to appeal, take it up to the Madras High Court. But even there, just last year, the court sided with the original decision. They upheld the rejection.
Okay, so 2 strikes and they're out, huh? What was the court's thinking? Why did they say no?
Well, the main thing was they said the invention didn't have this thing called an inventive step, which is like super important if you want to get a patent. They basically felt like it wasn't different enough from what was already out there, not a big enough leap.
Ah, right, inventive step. I've definitely heard that term before, but I'm not sure I totally get it. Could you break it down for us regular folks?
Sure, yeah. So basically, it's not enough for an invention to just be new, like nobody's done it before. It has to be something special, something that's a significant step beyond what we already have. It can't be something that, anyone with a bit of knowledge in the field could just, oh yeah, put that together.
Okay. So how do they decide that? Like, who gets to say what's a big enough leap?
Well, that's where it gets kind of interesting. They use this idea of a person skilled in the art, almost like this imaginary person.
Oh, wow. Okay, now we're getting really conceptual here.
Right. It sounds kind of funny, but it's this legal term, and it basically represents someone who has like average knowledge and skills in whatever field we're talking about. So in this case, the court imagined a team, you've got a software engineer and a medical expert working together. And they basically said, you know what, to this team, this invention, it wouldn't be that groundbreaking. It wouldn't be like mind-blowing. It'd be pretty obvious.
Okay, I'm starting to get the picture here. So the court thought that, like, this team could have come up with the same thing on their own. So did they actually find other inventions that were already out there, like similar ones?
Yep, you got it. That's exactly what they did. They looked at this thing called prior art, which is basically any inventions or information that's already out there, like publicly available, that's related to this tech we're talking about. And they found 3 existing inventions that they thought were pretty relevant, labeled D1, D2, and D3, kind of like exhibits in a case,
Okay, so D1, D2, D3, these are like the pieces of the puzzle, right?
Mhm.
And the court's saying Navya Network Inc. just kind of put them together differently, but they didn't invent anything totally new.
Yeah, you're on the right track. Out of the 3, D3 was the closest to what Navi was trying to do. It was a healthcare management system that used guidelines to, suggest treatments to patients. But the big difference was it didn't have this quantitative analysis piece, the whole number crunching thing.
So D3 was on the right path, but like missing a key ingredient. What about the other 2? Did D2 and D1 fill in those gaps?
Well, here's where it gets really interesting. So D2, it actually had a way to rank and score treatment options based on what the patient wanted, which was something D3 was missing. And then you've got D1, which was all about presenting those treatment options to the patient in a way that was easy to understand and use, taking their preferences into account.
Gotcha. So D3 builds the foundation, D2 throws in some personalization, and D1 makes it all user-friendly.
Yeah.
So basically the court was saying if you just mash those 3 together, boom, you've got Navya's invention.
Exactly. And you know what's even more interesting? They even said that, like, if you were looking at D3, it was almost like there were these clues, these hints that would naturally lead you to D2 and D1. And if you followed those clues, you'd probably end up with something pretty darn close to what Navya Network Inc. was trying to patent. It's like they were saying, look, anyone working on this, they'd see D3 and think, what about patient preferences? And bam, there's D2. And then how do we make this easy for people to actually use? Oh, hey, there's D1.
It's almost like the court was playing connect the dots with these inventions.
Yeah.
So what did Navya Network Inc. say to all of this?
Yeah.
Did they just throw in the towel?
Well, they tried to push back a bit. They said, hey, our thing is actually more advanced. It's not just a simple mashup. They pointed out that their system actually graded the experts whose opinions they were using. Like they were trying to say, see, we're adding an extra layer of sophistication here.
So they were saying, like, not all expert opinions are created equal.
Yes.
Right. Some hold more weight than others.
Exactly, yeah. But the court wasn't really buying it. They basically said, look, just because you're ranking the experts, that doesn't mean you've done something truly groundbreaking. It's still based on those same building blocks. It's still an obvious progression from what's already out there.
Oh, man. It's got to be tough to hear after all that work. So what happens to Navya Network Inc. now? Do they just scrap the whole project and go home?
Not necessarily. Just because they couldn't get the patent doesn't mean they can't still develop the system and put it out there. It just means they won't have that exclusive control, those special rights that a patent would have given them.
So they could still try to make it big in the healthcare world. It's just going to be a tougher climb without that legal protection.
Right, exactly. They might need to focus on other things that make their system stand out. Maybe they could really nail the user experience, make it super intuitive and easy to use. Or maybe they'll double down on data security, make sure it's top-notch. Or they could find a niche market, a specific group of patients or doctors who really need this kind of tool. There are still ways to be successful. It just might require a different strategy.
It really makes you think about how tough it can be for people trying to create something new, especially when there's already so much out there.
It does, doesn't it? I mean, this whole case, it really highlights those challenges, especially with software. It's so complex. And then you add in something like medicine, where there's already a ton of research and technology, and it just gets exponentially harder to prove that you've come up with something truly unique, something worthy of a patent.
It's like trying to invent a new type of sandwich when there are already a zillion sandwiches out there.
Yeah, exactly. You've got all these ingredients, all these technologies, and the trick is to find a way to combine them in a way that's never been done before, something that's not just the next obvious step. And that's where understanding patent law, knowing about this inventive step idea, that becomes so crucial.
Right, like Navya Network Inc.
Yeah.
They might have had a genuinely good idea, a system that could actually help people, but they just couldn't convince the court that it was special enough to warrant a patent.
Yeah.
And that kind of makes you think, what does this mean for the bigger picture, What are the implications of this?
That's a great question, and it brings up some really important points, like where do we draw the line? How do we balance encouraging innovation with making sure that patents are only granted for truly groundbreaking inventions?
Yeah, it's a tricky balance for sure. You don't want to stifle creativity and progress by setting the bar too high, but you also don't want to just hand out patents like candy for things that are just minor tweaks, right?
Exactly. If it's too easy to get a patent, then it kind of defeats the purpose, right? It could actually slow down innovation because you've got all these patents locking down tiny improvements, preventing others from building on those ideas and creating something truly revolutionary. But on the flip side, if you make it too hard to get a patent, people might just give up. Why bother? So finding that sweet spot, that's the real challenge.
This makes me wonder, does this ruling mean we're going to see fewer innovations in this whole area, like medical decision-making software? Are people going to be less likely to try and patent their ideas now?
Well, it's tough to say what the long-term impact will be for sure. But what this case does is it serves as a warning,
Yeah.
It tells anyone working in this field, hey, you really need to do your homework. You need to be super careful about showing how your invention is different, how it's not just an obvious combination of things that already exist. You need to make a strong case, be very meticulous in showing your work.
So it's not impossible to get a patent for this type of software. It's just that you're going to have to be extra convincing, show that your idea is truly unique and deserves that protection.
You got it. You need to know all the prior art, know it inside and out, and then you need to be able to explain in a clear and compelling way what makes your invention stand out from the crowd. And that can be tough because sometimes, the most amazing groundbreaking inventions, they seem so obvious in hindsight.
Totally. It's like once you see it, you're like, oh, of course. Why didn't I think of that?
Right. That's the funny thing about innovation. Sometimes the ideas that change the world, they seem so simple and straightforward once they're out in the open. But the journey to get there, to see those connections that no one else saw, that's where the real genius lies.
And that must be such a tough job for those patent examiners, right?
Yeah.
They have to try and predict what's going to seem obvious in the future while also recognizing the ingenuity of what's being presented to them right now.
For sure, it's a constant dance between hindsight and foresight. They need to be deeply immersed in the current state of the art, but also have this vision, this understanding of where innovation might be headed. And it's not always a straight line, it's not always a predictable path.
Yeah, innovation doesn't always happen in these nice, neat little steps, does it? Sometimes it's like these huge leaps and bounds, these moments where everything changes.
Absolutely. It's not always about taking what we have and just making it slightly better. Sometimes it's about approaching a problem in a totally new way, throwing out the old assumptions and coming up with something that seems to come out of nowhere.
Those aha moments, those are the game changers. But how do you capture that in a patent application,
All right.
How do you prove that your aha moment is more than just the next logical step?
That's the million-dollar question, right? And honestly, I think it comes down to storytelling. You need to be able to explain your thought process, the path you took, the obstacles you faced, the dead ends, and then finally that breakthrough moment, how you arrived at your invention. It's not just about the what, but the how.
So the story behind the invention is just as important as the invention itself. It's about showing that journey, that creative spark.
You got it. Because that story, that's what really brings the inventive step to life. It provides the context, the rationale, the evidence that this wasn't just an obvious next step, but a real leap forward in thinking. It shows that spark of ingenuity.
This has been such a fascinating conversation. You've given us a lot to think about. Before we wrap up, though, I want to go back to something you mentioned earlier about the challenges of patenting software, especially in a field like medicine where there's already so much out there. What if, instead of focusing on the limitations, we flipped the script and focused on the opportunities?
Ooh, I like where you're going with this. Yeah, what if instead of looking at all this prior art like it's a roadblock, we thought of it as, I don't know, like a huge toolbox, right? We've got all these amazing tools, all these existing technologies, just waiting for someone to come along and put them together in a new way.
It's like having one of those giant Lego sets. Instead of getting bummed out because someone already built a castle, you can use those same pieces to build something completely different, like a spaceship, a robot, whatever you can dream up.
That's it. So instead of getting stuck on the fact that, oh, someone already patented a system for ranking treatments, what if we thought about how to combine that with other things like natural language processing or machine learning? I mean, the possibilities are endless, right? You could create something truly revolutionary.
Now you're talking. Imagine a system that should not only look at those scientific studies and expert opinions, but also, go out and find all those patient stories, the stuff people are sharing online in forums, on social media. It could use those super smart algorithms to figure out what it all means, and then, bam, use that information to help patients make decisions.
That would be incredible, wouldn't it? It would give patients such a richer, more personalized understanding of their options. They wouldn't just be relying on those traditional sources, they'd be tapping into this whole universe of information.
It's like moving from this one-size-fits-all healthcare to something that's truly tailored to each individual. But of course, like with any new technology, we got to be careful, right? There are new challenges, like making sure people's data is protected, making sure the algorithms aren't biased, making sure everyone has access to these tools, not just a select few. We have to be mindful of those things.
Oh, absolutely. That's so important. Innovation isn't just about coming up with shiny new things, it's about using them responsibly, ethically. We have to talk about the potential downsides, the risks, just as much as we talk about the benefits, and we need to make sure that whatever we create, it benefits everyone, not just a small group.
Well, you've given us so much to think about today. We started with this patent dispute, but we ended up exploring so much more: the nature of innovation, the challenges and the opportunities. It's been quite a journey.
And who knows, maybe one of you listening out there will be the one to come up with the next big thing in healthcare. Just remember, document your process, show how your idea is unique, and don't be afraid to push the boundaries.
That's right. Until next time, keep exploring, keep asking those tough questions, and keep diving deep.